Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We begin with those blistering temperatures. They're being felt not just across the country, but all across the globe. Countries from Japan, India, China to right here in the United States are dealing with oppressive heat, and it's hitting historic levels. The average global temperature spiked Monday to a record high of 62.6 degrees. Tuesday, the world's record heat climbed even higher to 62.9 degrees. And yesterday, the global temperature remained at that record high. States like Florida and Connecticut have activated extreme weather plans to try and help people stay safe in the face of these dangerous temps. And some folks are also finding their own ways to beat the heat.
Drinking a lot of Gatorade, water, staying hydrated.
Always parks that have sprinklers. We carry a lot of water. We spray them down all day.
Got to be creative. We've got team coverage with the latest on this extreme heat. We're going to begin with NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman, who has the latest forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. And I'm going to say more of the same because we have been stuck in this pattern for week after week after week. We're looking at severe weather. We're looking at that heat that you just talked about. So starting with the severe weather risk, because we're seeing some strong storms this morning. Looking at radar, you can see some pop-up storms. That's going to be the case throughout the Gulf Coast states, the southeast, into portions of the Carolinas. But it's into the central plains and northern high plains. That's where we're going to see the bullseye for some really heavy storms. Seeing some lightning. We even have some severe thunderstorm watches, severe thunderstorm warnings. We've been watching that pretty much all night long. We're going to continue to watch this as we go throughout the day. Notice all these bright colors, too, especially down near that severe thunderstorm warning. We're seeing some hail. That's where you see the purple. Also seeing some really heavy downpours. A lot of these thunderstorms are going to drop a lot of rain, and that could lead to some flash flooding. And this is the reason why. We have an area of cold front that's moving through very slowly, so it's sort of parked over the area. We have some cool air coming down from Canada. So the cold front with the cool air, kind of a trigger for these strong storms. And we're going to see them really fire up as we head throughout the later part of today. Same story as we go throughout tomorrow. So it's not just today in that part of the country. We're going to see more into the Rockies tomorrow. Also the chance for damaging winds and hail once again tomorrow. So for today, we're looking at 6 million at risk. We're looking at anywhere from Rapid City to Scottsbluff, Denver, Lamar, into Liberal. Where you see those yellows and the oranges, that's the indication of where the likeliest spot for these storms are. Then as we go throughout tomorrow, we're looking at another 11 million at risk. And notice it's the same area. So we get that heavy rain. We've been seeing the rain for days. Denver pretty much surpassed their year total already in terms of rainfall. So tomorrow we're talking Denver, Wichita, Oklahoma City with winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour and some hail. And this is your rainfall forecast. It's not just the plains. It's not just the mid-Mississippi Valley. We're talking parts of Florida as well with those summer-like downpours into the Gulf Coast states. Also portions of southern Texas could see some really heavy rainfall. And it's going to come quickly. So 2 inches per hour. You want to be careful as you're out and about because that could lead to some flash flooding, especially in the portions of the plains. So Salina to Oklahoma City, you are under the threat for some flash flooding. So we have that stormy weather, once again, the soggy weather. We're also watching some really high heat in some spots. Again, the southwest under excessive heat warning. And, Joe, it's not just the southwest. We're looking at the northeast, too. Syracuse could see temperatures well above normal for this time of year. Some spots into the 90s, feeling more like 100 degrees in some spots.
I feel like I could see the humidity this morning. Like I could just spell my name in the air or something.
And I felt like that yesterday, too. I walked to the parking garage in between shows. I'm like, oh.
You're like, I know. The hair is just out of control.
Growing.
All right, Michelle, thanks so much.
Sure.
Appreciate it. As this heat wave continues, many parts of the country are also dealing with dangerous air quality alerts. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson is in Houston with more on that. Priscilla, good morning.
Well, hey, guys, good morning. This morning, more than 20 million Americans are waking up to more blistering temperatures under more heat alerts amid another week of brutal heat. We saw triple-digit heat index in central Florida. They had to activate emergency plans on Wednesday because of just how hot it was getting. And we saw similar measures being taken in Connecticut. So this is really impacting cities all across the country. In fact, we saw record highs in places like Sarasota, El Paso, and Portland. And what is perhaps most concerning is that this week, the Earth recorded some of the hottest days on record ever. And this comes as half of the world is in winter. But on Monday, we saw a record-setting temperature of 62.6 degrees. And then that record was broken a day later when the global average temperature hit 62.4 6.9 degrees. And experts are saying that this is not a good achievement, that we are pushing our ecosystems to places that they have not gone before. And we don't yet know what the implications of that will be. Now, in addition to the extreme heat, there are also millions of Americans who are under air quality alerts in the Northeast and the Midwest as we grapple with another week of severe weather. But some good news, we may be moving into a season of milder temperatures heading into this weekend, so folks may be able to get out and enjoy a nice summer weekend. Guys, back to you.
We'll take that. Priscilla, thanks so much. Now to the latest on the legal troubles involving former President Trump and his handling of classified materials. More information has been released from the Mar-a-Lago search warrant. It shows federal agents became concerned about the whereabouts of some documents after viewing security camera footage. We should point out an attorney for Trump did not respond to a request for comment last night. For more, we're joined by NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, good morning. So the affidavit says that the security camera footage from Mar-a-Lago showed Trump ate walled nata, moving boxes out of a storage area. What could evidence like this mean for the case?
Video evidence from the beginning was always going to be important in this case, as it is increasingly in criminal cases everywhere. And sure enough, you have video apparently showing Walt Nauta moving these boxes of documents. Then what the prosecutors need to prove is what Walt Nauta knew and when he knew it. But if they have him moving documents, that gives them the physical aspect of many of the alleged crimes, which is concealing these documents. That's one of the magic words in one of the statutes with which Nauta and Trump are charged. So going from here, the next question is, well, who else moved documents? Who else knew about them? And the reality is those people are not named in the indictment. They may show up as cooperating witnesses. They may have provided evidence to the government. But what's interesting here is this begins to answer the question of all the potential defendants out there, of all the people in Trump's orbit, why this previously unknown person, Walt Nauta, why is he Trump's co-defendant in this indictment?
And as you know, Nauta was charged last month along with Trump in this 38-count indictment. He's expected to be arraigned today in Florida after a delay. So let's talk where his case goes from here. How much is it tied to Trump's case? And if he is convicted, what's the punishment he could face?
He's a co-defendant. It's directly tied to Trump's case. And I think this is particularly interesting, the fact that Walt Nauta has not yet been arraigned, and here's why. Walt Nauta, all indications are that he is aligned with Trump in lockstep. They are co-defendants and probably are under a joint defense agreement, although I don't know. But at this point, to what degree Walt Nauta has loyalty to Trump? He's apparently still working for him. This may change as the case drags on over the months. And this case is not going to trial in this calendar year, in my opinion. In theory, it could. It's just not likely to happen. So as time drags on, Walt Nauta may reevaluate continuously whether or not he wants to be a co-defendant and go to trial with Donald Trump. This kind of disparate treatment, in other words, that Trump already has his lawyers and has been arraigned, but Walt Nauta, for whatever reason, doesn't have a lawyer and wasn't arraigned until at least now. So what does that say about Walt Nauta? At what point does he say, hey, why don't I have the same treatment as my co-defendant? Is he really in my corner? These are the kinds of things that may affect whether Walt Nauta decides down the road he wants to approach prosecutors for a deal or he wants to stick it out and go all the way to the bitter end, which is a trial, a very public trial, perhaps the most important, notorious trial in American criminal history.
And real quick, I want to talk about that trial. We initially thought it could be in August. That always seemed unlikely. Now we know Special Counsel Jack Smith, he's requesting it start in December. Real quick, this is not surprising, is it?
Not at all. And this is just one example of the dozens of different reasons why a trial, even a federal trial, and federal court moves a lot faster than state court, but even in federal court, when you have a case like this that involves very sensitive documents, a very important defendant, a defendant that you have to essentially shut down the courthouse to even have a simple appearance like an arraignment. So all of these things will contribute to the delay of this case, and we haven't even gotten into the defendant's dispositive motions that he will file to try and throw the case out in its entirety. Those motions have to be briefed. They have to have a response, a reply. The judge has to consider them, and that's totally up to the judge. She can take as long as she wants. This case is not going to trial this year. It may not even go to trial next year.
And that would be the election year. So, all right, Danny, thank you so much. I always appreciate your analysis. An incredibly unusual whodunit is playing out in the West Wing. The Secret Service is investigating, trying to figure out who brought a small bag of cocaine into the White House. Officials say the bag was found Sunday night in a common area where staff and visitors store personal belongings like cell phones before they step closer to the heart of the president's office space. For more, we're joined by NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli. So, Mike, take us through the latest on this investigation. What do we know?
Well, yesterday we learned that the laboratory came back with a more conclusive test confirming that it was indeed cocaine in this small dime-sized plastic bag. And interestingly, we learned late yesterday that the federal lab is continuing to examine this bag, looking for things like DNA or a fingerprint that might help indicate who brought it into the White House. Now, the Secret Service, as part of its investigation, is also looking through video of the West Wing there, looking through the visitor logs to try to determine who was coming and going over the course of the weekend before this was found. But we also know that it helped narrow the location, the White House confirming that it was indeed this area where visitors or individuals coming for meetings at the West Wing might be asked to leave their personal items. That's significant because the strong suggestion at this early stage from the White House is that the person who likely brought this in to the West Wing was a visitor, not a White House staffer. But we understand why the White House would be trying to leave us with that impression. This has been an embarrassing story that has taken up quite a bit of attention from the White House, not on the president's agenda.
Yeah, and Mike, I mean, officials say this investigation could probably take a couple of weeks. I guess I would assume, there's cameras everywhere. They're going to solve this right away. But what are some of the obstacles they're facing?
Well, the single biggest question that sources familiar with the investigation say they still have not resolved was how long had this small baggie been in the location where it was discovered Sunday night? Is it something that was placed there on Sunday and quickly discovered? Or is it something that might have been there for days, weeks, even longer? Because that would significantly make it more complicated for investigators to try to determine who might have brought it in by looking at things like the camera footage and the visitor logs. There's also every possibility, our sources are telling us, that there might not be enough forensic data on this baggie to help narrow down who it was. So that is the bottom line here, why they're tempering expectations about just how quickly we might learn who brought this in.
And Mike, an important note, President Biden and his family were away from the White House when this was found. What are we hearing from the Biden administration about the investigation?
Yeah, of course, we learned about this on the 4th of July holiday. So it was only yesterday that Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, had to face questions, and she faced many, but ultimately she did not really offer much more than the fact that the White House is leaning on the Secret Service for this investigation. Listen to some of what the press secretary said yesterday.
Where this was discovered is a heavily traveled area where many White House, West Wing, I should be even more specific, West Wing visitors come through. It is under investigation by the Secret Service. This is in their purview. We have confidence that the Secret Service will get to the bottom of this.
Now, one of the questions I asked Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday was what would the consequences be if it's determined that this was a White House staffer or even the guest of a White House staffer? She said she would not engage in hypotheticals at this point, but she did say that all White House staffers are subject to routine drug testing as part of their employment there.
All right, Mike Memoli, we'll be talking much more about this one in the coming days. Thank you so much.
You can be sure of that. Thanks.
The suspect in the Philadelphia mass shooting is being held without bail. 40-year-old Kim Brady Carricker is facing multiple charges for Monday's shooting, which killed 5 people and injured 2 children. Officials say the suspect appeared to be shooting people at random. Now, authorities say the suspect had what they call a ghost gun. That means it's harder to trace and is usually built from parts of other guns. 2 New Jersey firefighters were killed after they became trapped while fighting a fire on a docked ship. That fire broke out last night at Port Newark, just outside of Newark Airport. The docked ship contained thousands of cars with flames spreading on the ship's 11th and 12th floors. Newark's fire chief says the firefighters became lost after getting pushed back by the intense heat. They were later found inside the ship and pronounced dead. No word yet on what sparked that fire. It is a major discovery that could have huge implications for women in sports. Scientists have detected the first case of CTE in a professional female athlete. Australian football player Heather Anderson suffered multiple concussions during her career. Now, her death is still being investigated by officials, but researchers suspect that she did die by suicide. They also performed an autopsy on Anderson at her family's request and found markings that are consistent with CTE. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us now to explain more about CTE and how this could impact women's sports. First, the basics remind us, what is CTE? How does it affect the brain?
And good morning, Joe. We've known about CTE for years, mainly with men and men's professional sports. And what we're finding out is it's happening more and more. And up until now, we've seen women with CTE, but not professional sports women. And this is the first one. And essentially what happens with CTE is the brain gets enough of these hits that it ends up dying. The brain cells inside end up dying in certain areas, and it's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Encephalopathy means that that brain cell has been damaged, that brain area has been damaged, and unfortunately this is a progressive disease. It usually starts out with milder symptoms, headaches, forgetfulness, possibly irritability, anger issues, and then it eventually progresses to a dementia-type condition. And this is unfortunate, but we've seen this happen time and time again, the death by suicide from this.
And we've seen it time and time again in male athletes. This is the first time in a female athlete, but women are more susceptible to concussions than men. So, I mean, does this diagnosis potentially change how doctors work with female athletes?
I think it is going to change things, and the main thing it's going to change is that increased suspicion of this could possibly happen, and also talking to female athletes, especially young female athletes, that, hey, this could be something that you need to be concerned with as well. In Heather's case, she ended up starting rugby or Australian rules football when she was 5 and has many, many years of Australian rules football, meaning many hits to the head that we think probably contributed to this CTE.
So remind us, no matter who you are, if you're an athlete, what are the precautions you can take to try and keep yourself safe from this?
And again, that's probably the most important point. No matter who you are, if you play a sport where you get hits to the head, that can be football, that can be rugby, that can be soccer, that can be lacrosse, a variety of different sports, then you need to worry about this. And the main thing is we have found out it's not the concussions that cause CTE, it's actually those subconcussive hits where you get hits time and time and time again, and that turns out to be cumulative. So you don't have to have a concussion, you don't have to pass out. The main thing is to avoid those hits. Learn how to tackle appropriately, learn how to play the sport without getting those impacts to the head appropriately, and that can do the one thing that can hopefully stave this off over time.
How much of a role is equipment playing right now in trying to keep people safe, keep athletes
safe?
The
main role equipment is playing is giving players that false impression this could protect them from concussions, this could protect them from CTE. But studies have shown both football helmets and regular American football and rugby-type foam helmets like you saw Heather Anderson wearing in that picture we showed on her don't protect you necessarily from those subconcussive hits, because the brain inside, the skull still moves around when you get those hits, a little less energy, so it's going to protect you a little bit over time, but it's not really going to protect you, and we don't think it offers much protection against CTE. This is still the Wild West of diagnosis, the Wild West of treatment, and the Wild West certainly of cures going on here.
We're just now making new discoveries now. All right, exactly. Dr. John Torres, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And if you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.